Hello, class. It's Miss Roberts here, and tonight we're going to explore our first section, our first module, Understanding and Introduction to Communication. Let's begin. So let me go ahead and set up the PowerPoint here. So let's go ahead and review communication. Now, in this course, we're going to be exploring different types of communication, but if you take special interest in any part of these sections that we go over during the semester, just know that we have classes that are dedicated to interpersonal communication, small group communication, and public speaking. So if you want to explore these classes in more depth, go ahead and check those classes out. Let me know if you have any questions. Let's begin. All right. So communication, what and why? During our chat tonight, we're going to talk about the characteristics of communication, different types, communication in a changing world, what is communication competence, and misconceptions about communication. All right. So in communications class, we explore not only what communication is, but why we communicate. Why is this a topic of subject or a subject of study, there you go, a subject of study in the first place. Communication is everywhere and in everything. That allows us to share and learn, connect with others, present an identity, establish and meet goals, and influence others. Think about the ways in your everyday life you do the following. Think about social media and how we have connection and sharing that way. When we communicate and make friends, talk to our family members, the way we talk to our bosses, the way we use communication to establish who we are in the world. Communication allows us to do all these things, and the way we communicate is distinctly human. So we're going to be exploring that throughout the semester, but I want you just to think about how is communication or what ways communication is impactful in your life. So I'm going to be moving myself around as we go along. Let me see. I'm going to go over here. My apologies. All right, so I'll go ahead and read through. Okay. So, in characteristics of communication, there are several characteristics that we need to pay attention to. Communication is a process. It's ongoing, it's continuous, and the rules change, especially as technology changes. So, let me go ahead and move up a little bit. Thank you so much for your patience. Communication is also relational. It's not something that we do to others, but with others, depending on the relationship we have with the other person and their relationship with us, power dynamics, and so on. It affects how we communicate. Think about the differences between communication between you and your parents, or you or others in your family, such as grandparents, aunts and uncles, or older cousins. Think about the communication between your older sibling versus your younger sibling or younger cousins, nieces or nephews. Think about the communication patterns between your peers, your boss, your instructors. Depending on the relationship you have with the person, determines the rules and how you engage with the person. And then finally, communication is symbolic. So symbols in this case can mean many things. It can mean actual pictures, the actual words on the screen, or the words that are coming out of my mouth. Symbols are used in language to represent things such as processes, ideas, and events. Nonverbal communication is also symbolic as well, so we'll be examining that a little later on. All right. So overall, communication is a symbolic process that is irreversible and relational. I want to explore the irreversible part just a little bit more. One of the more fascinating characteristics or traits of communication is that once you say something, you can never not say it. So when we say communication is reversible, think about it like this. Have you ever said something that you did not mean or that you wanted to take back, especially in an argument? Well, unfortunately, because of communication, once that message is out there and it's received, then you can't take it back. You can explain it away, you can apologize for it, but the message is sent and received by someone else. So I always thought that was fascinating. But communication is comprised of symbols, of processes, is irreversible, and it's relational. All right, so let me move myself a little bit. So, one of the common threads of most communication studies classes, especially in the very beginning stages, such as freshman or sophomore year, that we encounter the transactional and linear models. So, when we're thinking about what are the components of a conversation, this is what we're talking about. Now, the earlier models were linear. So, for example, there were two people, and in the encounter with those two people, one sender, like an arrow, sent a message to a receiver, and then they passively just received the message. However, in later models, it was more of an engagement between both parties. And it also acknowledges that there is feedback. Feedback can be both verbal and or nonverbal as well. So there's communication in silence. So in later models, it resembles more of a tennis game than an archer. Senders and receivers exchange messages back and forth. So I'm going to keep myself up here a little bit. This says parts of communication model. You'll also be able to have this in the modules, but of course, if you have any questions, let me know. So there are several parts of a communication model. We have the speaker, the originator of communication, the message, what is being communicated by the speaker, so what are the actual words that are coming out of my mouth or the words on the page. Then we have the channel, which means how are the messages being sent? Is it spoken, face to face, telephone, through video chat, whichever. So the message is what is being said, and the channel is the means of communication. Then we also have the environment, the time and the place that communication occurs. So, for example, are you communicating at the same time? Are you communicating at different times, different places, or what have you? Then we have listeners, so the audience that receives the message. We have feedback, so the observable messages from listener to speaker. Noise. I don't know if you heard it through my microphone, but noise can be disturbances in communication, so it can be actual noise, like clap, or internal. So, for example, are you tired? Are you sleepy? Are you preoccupied with an event that you want to go to the next day? Did you have an argument before coming into class? So these are a part of the communication model. Let's go ahead and explore some more. Okay. So with the linear model of communication, you see we have both the sender and the receiver, but notice that the arrow just goes one way. So the sender encodes, so absorbs the information, and the receiver decodes the information. Notice that it's just one arrow, but it doesn't account for feedback. Now let's improve on this model with the transactional communication model. See, there's an arrow going both ways. Both sides are responding, encoding, and decoding messages. We have the environment, so those are the little circles right here, and the noise in the message. Next, we have types of communication. So when you think about this class, it's unique because we explore a little bit of here, a little bit of there, a little bit of pieces of communication studies. Like I said in the beginning of the video, if you want to explore these classes in more depth after we're done with this class this semester, then go ahead and explore an interpersonal communication or a small group communication or a public speaking course. Different types of communication study, and of course, this is not the extensive list, but we have intrapersonal, so it's the opposite of interpersonal when we communicate with oneself and communicate our identities to outside audiences. Then we have interpersonal, so that's where two or more people are communicating in person through mediated channels. Then we have small groups. So usually small groups are between 3 to 12 people. Beyond that, it's more of a larger public or organizational group. But that means people in the small group participate actively with each other. Then we have organizational communication. So you're not just focusing on a group or a person or an individual, but companies, nonprofits, schools, where organizations and parts of organizations function to make the company or organization succeed. Then we have public speaking. So that means you have a speaker up front, you have an audience with limited amounts of speaking, limited verbal feedback, but either a person or a panel of people are addressing one group. So there are main speakers and their audiences. Then we have mass communication. So that is your social media, newspaper, television. It's mass messages transmitted widespread across audiences. And then finally, a little bit of a Venn diagram there. Social media communication. So through various social media platforms, it allows audiences for both, communication for both large audiences and close circles. All right. So let's explore communication competence. As we go along this semester, we are trying to gain communication competence through various contexts. Okay, interpersonal communication is one of the first, is one of the first parts of communication that we explore. How do we engage with our family, friends, romantic partners, and other people on a one-on-one level? Then we're going to explore public speaking, like I said before. How do you present in front of an audience? And then how do we engage with a small group on a team on a project? So these are several different types of communication competencies that we're going to explore throughout the semester. But in essence, to remember communication competence, the communication has to be effective and appropriate. Effective gets the results that you want, and appropriate enhances the relationship in which the communication occurs. However, with communication competence, it's not a one and done deal. Competencies change, situations change, and allows for flexibility. So there's no one ideal way to communicate. It's situational. So one situation might not fit in this context, but it might fit in another context. I'll give you an example. As an instructor, I feel very comfortable in classes with about 20 to 40 people because that's what I'm used to teaching. But if I were suddenly put in a class where I had to teach 100 students, then that's a competency you'll have to learn. I will have to learn how to engage with that many people. I have to grade and be available for all those people. And that will be something that I will learn, that we'll have to learn. So although I might be able to be confident that I have communication competence in a traditional classroom size, situationally, if you put me in somewhere else, then that's something I'll have to learn and adapt to. And, but it can be learned. So if you are nervous about a certain communication situation, say a job interview, speaking in front of an employer or a classroom, first date, trying to find a friend for the first time or a friend group for the first time, meeting a new relative for the first time, all types of situations where we'll be put in non-familiar communication situations. Just know that you'll get through it and it can be learned. So here are some more tips to becoming a competent communicator. You'll have the ability to choose from a wide range of behaviors. choose an appropriate behavior, be able to perform behavioral skill, excuse me, ability to perform behavior skillfully. I had to slow it down a little bit. Perform behavior skillfully. Be able to empathize and take the perspective of others. That's a really good skill to learn, especially in interpersonal communication. Use cognitive complexity and analyze the behaviors of someone else's behavior. So being able to take perspective, being able to understand the nuance in communication, understand there's not one way to do things, and being able to be adaptable. Self monitor and have self awareness. So just making sure that you're able to figure out what your behaviors are, what are some of the behaviors that you need to change in order to fit that appropriate and effective model, and ask questions or seek out questions if you have any. And then have the ability to commit to the relationship of themselves and others. So making sure, just going back to the transactional communication model, that it's not just you communicating. You're not talking to yourself. There is another person or persons involved in that exchange, and being able to navigate both. All right, let me move myself down a little bit. All right, misconceptions about communication. That requires complete understanding. Sometimes we might not understand everything about communication encounter. It might be something that's new to us, but as long as we're willing to learn and communicate if there's issues with communication, which is totally meta, but just thinking that it's a all in one and done. And if you mess up in one communication context and it's just over, that all or nothing thinking can be detrimental to us. So just make sure that you do your best and communicate that you are doing your best. That communication can solve all problems, especially in interpersonal contexts. Communication by itself cannot solve interpersonal issues. It has to be backed up by action and consistency. So, making sure that communication is a great start to solving interpersonal conflict and managing anxieties and managing navigating through the world, but behavior has to back it up. Sometimes we start talking and we stop talking. Listening is an important skill in communication, believe it or not. So, making sure that sometimes knowing when to not speak, to listen, and then speak again, and knowing when to speak is very important. Meanings are in words, so making sure you say what you mean and knowing that the power of words excuse me, communication and words are powerful, and don't just say things frivolously. And sometimes speaking more doesn't make it better, or it doesn't make the situation better. Sometimes we need to listen, change behaviors, and empathize. And sometimes that doesn't involve talking. All right. Okay, so that is a brief introduction to the class and communication as a whole. I look forward to seeing your growth and seeing you learn throughout the semester. Of course, let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you soon. Alrighty, bye.